Diane, thank you very much. My name is Terry Nother. I've lived here since 1966. I've caused a lot of trouble. I'm still doing it. And I've been hanging out in my garden plot, the city plot here in London. We have a small house. So anyway, here's what you've got in the soil. You've got you can read it. The only thing that I see wrong with that picture is the fork. Yeah. Now, why do I look at the fork? Because I only use copper tools in my garden. And there's a reason why I use copper tools in my garden, because copper is a conductor. Steel is a magnetic pull. Steel will rob the energy from your soil. Copper will facilitate the delivery. I use a phrase that says, invite the rainbows into your garden. When you use steel, you break the conductivity of the energy flowing into your soils. When you use copper, you facilitate. The plant needs that energy. A full 20% of all growth comes from the soil. 80% of all growth is above the soil. It's the wind, it's the humidity, it's the moisture, it's the sound, it's the song of the birds, it's the rustle of leaves, it's the human activity. 80% comes from above the soil. So, there's my garden. Probably in early spring. I go down, I'm very cheap. No, maybe frugal. I go down and I collect these tarps from the roof truss people. They give them away. So I take them and I cover my beds in the wintertime. I fill it up with compost and I get loads of leaves and I use raised beds, and I find it the simplest way, because as you get older you don't want to bend down as much. So you kind of get a little lazy. The other thing is I don't like weeds in the garden. Not that I don't like them, there isn't any room for them. But weeds are a good indicator of deficiencies. So that's how I end my garden in the winter. There's another picture of the same thing. It's a community garden, about 1,000 square feet. I would say I get a full 60% of all my food from my garden. And I extend my season. I finished picking carrots up last year at the garden in January the 2nd of this year, actually, before the ground froze. And I was in the garden planting again in March. So this again another picture. I use rocks to hold the tarps down. I also use rocks to hold the heat in. The heat transfers through the black tarp and prepares the soil so that it's not frozen for a long, long time. So when I'm ready to go gardening, there's a winter scene. By the way, this pallet here happens to be a vertical garden. But I toss them on there to keep the tarps in place, and by the time the sun melts it, all the snow around me, so nobody else is in the garden but me, and I'm having fun. There's another scene, the same thing. So here's the beginning of the growing season, and I believe I've got a windbreak there, and that stops the north wind from coming in a bit. Now, the scene early in spring, the potatoes that you see, the plants that you see coming up here are actually early potatoes that I planted in March. So what I do in the tarp is I go along and I'll cut holes, I'll push down into the soil that's now soft, and the worms are rotted there, and I'll plant my potatoes, my carrots, my beets, my root crops, because I want to get an early start. The only trouble with that is when you get such an early start, there isn't much to do in April. So you're hanging around looking for something to do. Then of course I start playing with my garden. I use the white tubes. They're an interesting thing. I just found I like them. So what I've got is I've got these tubes give me a microclimate that in a sense protect the plant. Now I'm not sure whether that happens, but it feels good to me and I grow a lot of food that way. This particular patch happened to be, the plants on the left are the early potatoes growing fine. What's actually in this bed here are sweet potatoes that don't like to be planted too early in our area. So I found that by planting them in these, what I call green sleeves, they survived very nicely and grew into fine plants, and I harvested quite a few sweet potatoes. I did 2 sections. These sweet potato plants, the sets actually came from potatoes that I purchased at one of the local farmers, or one of the local markets in town, because we eat a lot of sweet potatoes. On the right, you see the kale and the cabbages. The sad story about them is we had a family of groundhogs that really, not groundhogs, yeah, groundhogs, that really liked my stuff. And I lost at least 100 cabbage plants and kale plants to them. And it wasn't so much that they ate one, they would eat a nibble of one, and then they would come tomorrow and eat a nibble of another one. And by the time I was finished, all the plants were kind of chewed down, which is good. They were happy. I just planted some more. You can see the tubes, and basically all it is it's drainage hose that I found as scrap, and I cut it up and stuck it in the soil. And the other thing, it keeps out the weeds. And again, early planting, you can see the plot behind me there doesn't have barely anything growing, and I'm well advanced on my way. I husband every square inch of my place. In between the plants, I'll plant, over in the back side you'll see where there's asparagus growing, but there's also a complete field of onions right there, or a section of onions. So I'm kind of growing things in between growing things. The other thing I do is, because I'm using raised beds, if I run out of space, I'll plant in the actual walking spaces so that I can have something else to eat. This year I planted some corn. Came out quite nicely. My back garden greenhouse, the simple thing. It works great for starting everything in the summertime. So it's good. And again, you can see the tarp and the green sleeves. This is a great thing. I like compost. Now, too much compost is not very good, and I found out something that compost is better to be made as compost outside your garden, but I actually bring it in and I make it in my garden. And this is spent mushroom compost from one of our local mushroom farms. He's a friend of mine, so I take advantage of it, but I return the gift with produce at the end of the year. A trailer load like that takes me, 2 or 3 hours to get it, to unload it and put it in the garden. There it is in the mountain. The plants you see there are arugula, which I think we planted too late, but I'll work that compost into my garden soil, and I'll just keep going at that. Leaves, the same thing. Everybody on the street thinks I'm crazy. I collect too many leaves, and they wonder what I do with them. Leaves, actually, they're the minerals that the tree redeposits for the growth of herself, for the growth of the tree. And so what ends up happening is, when you take the leaves, you're actually taking away the nutrients that the tree requires to grow. Fortunately, we live in a city where we have tons and tons of leaves. So I load up my van, put it there, put the compost down, dig in the leaves and cover it. And that's what it looks like for the rest of the year. You get a lot of aeration, you get a lot of worms, and those are the guys you want in your garden for all good reasons. Just a brief mention about something about water. We all use water when we grow. There's something called structured water. And I've been aware of water. In my own house, I have water treatment. Very briefly, I use a structure, what we call physical water treatment. This is a physical water treatment, where you induce vortexes into the water. You change the polarity of the water to a negative, the pipe being positive, so that there's no biofilm or boundary layer in your pipes. And this is what you got. It actually makes the water wetter. The plant is able to uptake it faster and easier, and the growth is obvious. So there is such a thing. And once you have a device, it's a capital expenditure. It's a one-time cost, and it's done, and it lasts forever. This is an interesting thing. This is a Massey injector. Air is free. When you introduce aeration into your soil through the medium of water, you actually increase growth, and it's free. So why wouldn't you have air in your water available to the root plant, or the roots of the plant, so that you can actually get more? And it's introducing it. It's an organic component. The benefits of aeration are very simple. They're very, they're all there. So something that costs nothing delivers so much. Getting back to that point on the system, and the reason that a plant grows, and why it grows healthy, and why it's a nutrient-dense plant, these are all factors. And I like to think of it this way. It's not our job to adapt nature, or adapt ourselves to nature. It's our job to adopt nature, or have nature adopt us. Adoption is an ownership position. An adaptation is a use position. I want to own nature, or nature own me. By taking possession of nature, you change the dynamic in your garden. You change how everything works together because you're a part of that. And your job in a garden boils down to only one thing. You facilitate the growth, or you facilitate the flow of creative energy expressed in a plant. So when I discover the journey of facilitating that flow and how I can make it better, listening to your inner guidance so that you can make the soil better, so you can invite the rainbows into your garden, so you can improve in every area that you want to challenge yourself to experience the dynamic of growth. This is what I like to do. You can increase the soils and increase the roots and so on like that. Now, how do you measure nutrient density? There's a device called a refractometer. It measures the bricks, the sweetness, the measure of the juices, which in turn tells you the vibrancy and the quality of the plant. My wife doesn't use the bricks or the refractometer. She uses her taste buds, and she'll say, your corn is the sweetest I've tasted. Yesterday, I went to the garden, I pulled out some sweet turnip or white turnips. I brought them home to eat, and you peel it and you chop it up, and it's raw. And the intention was to boil it with some potatoes that I found in the garden too. But yesterday, when I started eating it, I just didn't want to boil it. I just wanted to eat it all. It was wonderful. It was very, very sweet. It was really nice. So you can use a refractometer for measuring the bricks and get your thing. Now, there's a young fellow. His name is Shobham. He's from Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. He's helping me pick apples. I just want to tell you the story of the apples. I'm going to read this quietly. I had passed by the site many times, preoccupied. At last, her subtle disguise spoke to me. It was exciting. I stopped to check her fruit. At first glance, I was stunned. The copious amount of apples was overwhelming. I reached for one, and like Adam, I ate the whole thing. Impressed, giddy with excitement, I knew that it was imperative to harvest this gift lest another discover her hidden treasure. I rallied the troops and set a date. Saturday afternoon, quiet in the area, we could harvest all these apples. My accomplice was the Fanshawe student from Mauritius. Armed with bushel, baskets, bags, ladders, and a sense of stumbling on a treasure, we proceeded to unload the teeming fruit. We were enjoying the excavate as we commented on how many apples the tree had produced, hanging in the same spot while clutching handfuls and laughing. It seemed that our admiration was also overflowing with gratitude. It struck me as I collected each handful that the tree was indeed grateful to offer this great gift, as if she was showing us how abundant creation can be with so little effort on our part. I also felt that we had to use a strong pull to release the apples, as if the mother wanted to hold or offer a final assurance to each of her children that the original connection was strong and that they would serve their purpose. She released each one, and our branches became less burdened as they were relieved from carrying this abundance. Bag after bag was collected, and we looked at our haul with great admiration, all the while munching on exquisite succulent fruit. We loaded up the van and promised to return to finish the job. As I drove away, it seemed that the tree was thankful for our efforts. She seemed to know her mission, and all the creative flow was fulfilled, the reason for her existence and acknowledged purpose. The days dragged on. My accomplice was unavailable, so I daunted and returned to finish the escapade. This time in the warm workaday afternoon, lots of spectators and curious fellows ventured to see what I was doing. Secretly, they envied my willingness to respond to the tree. For the next 3 hours, I climbed and plucked, snatched, stretched, till I had dislodged all the apples. The top of the tree held the bigger and the most colorful fruit. At last, finished and loaded down with bushels, bags, and boxes, I slipped away, saying thanks to the tree for her strength and abundance, promising I would return next year. My lessons were entrenched in that we are only players, dabbling at the edge of possibilities. Thank you.